Amidst the snow and the fallen, a lone figure stands victorious. But from the blizzard emerges a challenger, wounded but not broken. The commander questions his presence, reminding him of his duty far to the east. But the young warrior grits through the pain, declaring he is here to strike him down. The man's crimson eyes show no surprise, only cold, calculated contempt. The challenger accuses him of a terrible betrayal, of using his own troops as bait. And in his eyes, a fire of pure vengeance begins to burn. His father callously confirms it, dismissing the wingless as disposable and calling him his foolish son. The name Ash A. Elmheim echoes in the wind, a promise of rebellion, and with it, the symbol of a legacy now drenched in betrayal. This is his father, Roderick A. Elmheim, head of the continent's greatest martial house. Ash remembers the day this man found him dying alone in a blizzard, and to repay that debt, he became his father's perfect, unquestioning weapon. But his childhood in the Elmheim house was filled with humiliation. He was mocked by his siblings for being wingless, born without the family crest, a crest that grants immense magical power, a power Ash never had. So while they relied on magic, he relentlessly trained his body with the sword, pushing himself past every conceivable limit through sheer force of will, forging his own strength from nothing but sweat and determination. And in time, the wingless boy became a warrior in his own right. He remembers another mission, another ambush in the snow. He and his men found themselves completely surrounded, caught in a pincer. He had followed every order, believing in his father's cause. But Roderick simply told him his purpose as a tool was fulfilled, and that memory only fuels the fire burning in his eyes. He launches himself at Roderick, pouring every ounce of his fury into the attack, a cry for the trust that was so completely shattered. And his blade finds its mark, a clean strike against his father. Yet the blow only leaves a shallow gash, earning a condescending smirk. Before he can react, two others emerge from the storm, binding him in crimson chains. The two figures are revealed to be his own brothers, who cut him down without a second thought. Ash can only roar in defiance as the chains dig deeper into his flesh. His brother mocks him, sneering that a wingless will always be wingless. They stand over him, a perfect picture of the family that cast him out. Beaten and broken, Ash asks why his father ever saved him at all. Roderick coldly informs him that he was never the one he wanted. He grabs Ash by the hair, forcing him to meet his gaze, revealing the true reason he was taken in, for a power dwelling inside him. The words echo in Ash's mind, a concept he can't possibly comprehend. Roderick then mentions his mother with a chilling smile, preparing to take what he came for. Roderick reveals that Ash's mother was simply a vessel for his true prize. Ash reaches out in desperation, unable to process the horrifying truth. He screams for an answer as his brothers raise their blades for the final blow, but his hand falls limp, his strength finally giving out. As his vision fades, he can only wonder if this is the end. Questioning the very purpose of a life filled with nothing but pain, his consciousness drifts away into the cold, unforgiving snow. But then he feels a faint, unexpected warmth. A memory surfaces of a small boy waking up, wondering if this is the afterlife. He remembers being held safe and sound in someone else's arms. He realizes with a jolt that this isn't a dream, it's real. He remembers the woman who held him, now lying still in the snow, and he feels the weakness of his own tiny body, questioning if these small hands could possibly be his. Then he's lifted up, and a man's voice notes that he's just an infant. Ash looks up from the arms of his rescuer, his mind reeling. He sees the woman again, wondering if she's truly gone. But the man holding him sees a flash of gold in his eyes and gives a sharp command. His soldiers are ordered to find the woman who fled into the blizzard. For the sake of Duke Roderick, they must recover the infant she took. His golden eyes widen with a sudden, impossible clarity. The name Duke Roderick echoes in his mind, a chilling confirmation. He realizes with dawning horror that they are looking for him, the infant, and it all clicks into place. He hasn't just died, he's been sent back to the past. Suddenly, the woman holding him jolts into action, scooping him up from the cold ground. She decides there's no time for questions, only survival, knowing that if they stay, they will surely fall into the Duke's hands. Ash reaches out, his adult mind fighting against his infant body's weakness. He has to get away, as far away from that man as possible. A strange golden energy emanates from his tiny hands as he pushes against the snow. His infant lungs struggle for air in the freezing cold, and his small body feels like it's burning from the inside out. He can barely even crawl, dragging himself through the endless white. But the will of a seasoned warrior burns in his eyes. He will survive. He remembers the man who betrayed him, vowing to one day have his revenge. That burning promise fuels his desperate struggle for life. He pushes forward, leaving a lonely trail in the vast expanse of snow. But his strength finally gives out, and he collapses just as someone approaches. A young girl finds him, calling out to a stern-looking man she calls her father. The man, identified as Viscount Highfried, looks down in utter disbelief. He takes the child into his arms, wondering how an infant could possibly be out here. Exhausted from his ordeal, Ash finally rests in the stranger's embrace. But the Viscount's eyes suddenly widen with shock. He looks back at the impossibly long trail left in the snow, unable to comprehend how a mere baby could have traveled so far alone. As his consciousness fades, Ash drifts into a strange dream. He sees another infant, a memory from a life he doesn't understand, a vision of an angel coming to take him away. He's jolted awake by a poke to the cheek as the little girl calls him her angel. He opens his eyes to find himself surrounded by a group of curious young girls. Overwhelmed by the attention, his mind struggles to process the bizarre situation. He instinctively pushes away from their hold, his warrior's mind rejecting the coddling. He manages to stand on his own 2 feet and immediately tries to make a desperate escape. The girls call out in confusion, wondering what's happening, but Ash just runs, unable to understand why they're chasing him. In a moment of pure panic, he throws out a hand as a golden aura flares to life. His eyes glow with that same impossible power, something he never had before. And the wingless boy who only knew the sword suddenly finds himself flying on a torrent of magic. His body tumbles through the air, completely out of his control. The sudden burst of power sends him hurtling back towards the ground. But just before he hits, a figure catches him. It's Viscount Highfried, who can only remark on the strangeness of this child. Ash looks up, a jolt of recognition flashing in his eyes. This is Viscount Highfried, the older brother of the man who destroyed him, which means this must be the estate of the other Elmheim family. Highfried Elmheim, head of the Viscount house, a branch of the main family. Ash remembers him as one of the twin wings who served the royal family alongside Roderick. A man who, in Ash's original timeline, died in a civil war that destroyed his entire house. Ash stares at his tiny hand, now certain that he has truly returned to the past. But the irony is not lost on him. In trying to escape the Duke, he's fallen right into the hands of his brother. A woman holds him, confirming with her husband that the child's magic went wild, sending him flying. She smiles warmly, having known from the start that he was no ordinary infant. She pulls him into a gentle embrace, trying to soothe the fear he must have felt. Ash can only stare, unused to this kind of warmth and affection. Across the room, Viscount Highfried watches them with a calculating gaze. He reaches out, declaring that this child harbors a tremendous, undeniable power. And as he pulls back the infant's sleeve, he reveals the proof. A crimson mark on Ash's arm. The woman gasps at the reflection, for the crest is not just wings, but an impossible 7 of them. Ash stares at the mark on his own body, unable to understand how it's there. But in a flash of horrifying clarity, Roderick's final words come rushing back to him. He remembers the man holding him down in the snow, and the true reason he was ever saved in the first place. It was all to steal the power of the 7 wings for himself. The man who mocked him for being wingless was the very one who tore that power away. As the Viscountess holds him, Ash's mind burns with this newfound rage. She turns to her husband, asking what their next move will be, and Ash can only listen, knowing this situation has just become far more dangerous. He realizes this power is the key to his revenge against Roderick, and Viscount Highfried makes a stunning declaration he will adopt the boy as his own. Ash can only look up in shock, his mind reeling from the decision. The Viscount then reaches a hand out towards him, gently patting his head and calling him a fledgling who can't yet fly on his own. He vows to raise the boy himself until the day he's ready to soar. But in Ash's eyes, a different kind of fire begins to burn. Just then, one of the young girls suddenly collapses to the floor. The Viscountess calls out to her daughters who were busy playing nearby. They rush to their sister's side, explaining they were just worried about the new baby. The Viscountess holds Ash as her daughters gather around, one of them asking a question. She wants to know what they'll call their new brother. His new mother smiles, contemplating the perfect name for him. She lifts him high, declaring him a new star born into their family. And just like that, 10 years fly by. Viscount Highfried arrives at a grand estate, greeted with reverence. And from the carriage, a young boy steps out to open the door. It's Ash, now a composed young man with a sword at his side. He offers a hand to his sister, Alphen, telling her to be careful. She thanks him, calling him Aster, the new name he's carried for the last decade. Alphen walks with a serene smile, while Aster follows with a watchful gaze. They make their way through the courtyard, stepping into a world he once knew. They've come for an annual event hosted by a certain Duke's house, a social gathering for the continent's most powerful warrior families. It's a place for nobles to forge alliances and for the young to prove their worth. But as they arrive, they're met with an immediate, palpable tension. The crowd parts before them, their gazes filled with judgment and scorn. Whispers follow in their wake, mocking the Viscount for adopting a boy of unknown origins. They see his family as a disgrace, dragging the Elmheim name through the mud. And Aster looks up at the fortress of his sworn enemy, knowing all eyes are on him. Alfin tells him not to let their words affect him, clenching her fist as she warns that in this world, the weak are always crushed first. But Aster stands beside her. His expression is cold and hard as steel. His father explains that this is simply the reality of their house's current standing. He brought Aster here specifically to witness this harsh truth for himself. The Viscount turns to his son, asking if he's disappointed by their welcome. But a confident smirk plays on Aster's lips as he says this cold reception suits him just fine. His father lets out a hearty laugh, pleased by the boy's unyielding spirit. Aster remembers his past life, whereas the Elmheim family's disgrace. He suffered the most humiliating debut imaginable, but now vows things will be different. His golden eyes burn with a cold, unshakable resolve. But as they approach the manor, they're being watched from above. Two familiar faces look down on them with undisguised contempt. Aster, however, remains completely unfazed by the scrutiny. Together, they step into the lion's den, ready for what's to come. He's not just here to survive this debut, he's here to dominate it. Inside, the main event is already underway in an age where knights reign supreme. Young warriors clash in the arena, fighting for their family's honor. In this world, knights are expected to possess both power and splendor, and that power is proven through the strength of one's blade. The clash of steel echoes through the hall as two young nobles duel for glory. They circle each other, searching for any opening in their opponent's defense. Then, they launch themselves forward in a final decisive charge, but one of them reveals his true power, the glowing crest of his house. He channels its energy into his sword, shattering his opponent's blade with a single strike. The defeated boy can only stare in shock as his weapon is broken before him. The victor raises his sword to the cheering crowd, his win secured by the power of the wing crest. It's the ultimate symbol of the Elmheim family's absolute authority. From a balcony above, Aster and his family watch the arrogant display with cold indifference. His sisters seem particularly unimpressed by the brutish spectacle. His gaze is cold, haunted by the mocking faces of his past. He remembers that day all too well, beaten, broken, and utterly humiliated. Alfin's voice snaps him back to the present, her concern breaking through his thoughts. She asks if he's nervous about his first official gathering, but Aster simply smiles, saying this place feels almost nostalgic to him. His sister can only look on in confusion, not understanding the weight behind his words. Their father then steps in, announcing he has a conference to attend and entrusting Alfin to Aster's care. Alfin protests that she's the older one, but Aster just teases her for being clumsy. The Viscount encourages his son to use this opportunity to build connections with his peers, but he ends with a quiet, serious warning: to keep the secret of his 7 wings hidden at all costs. As their father departs, Alfin fumes while Aster calmly considers his father's words. But everywhere they turn, they are met with the cold, hostile glares of the other nobles. Aster knows that in an atmosphere like this, making connections is next to impossible. But a sudden glint in his eye reveals he has a different plan in mind. Alfin calls out in confusion as he suddenly turns and walks away from her. He simply states that he's going to go make some friends. He makes his way down the stairs, approaching a group of arrogant-looking nobles. Their leader, a smug red-haired boy, looks up and demands to know who he is. Aster greets him with a disarming smile, calling him by name, Brother Darius. He then introduces himself as Aster F. Elmheim, his new younger brother. He explains he simply saw them from afar and thought he'd come say hello. One of the boys quickly identifies him as the adopted kid from the Viscount's house. The name sends Darius into a rage, furious that an outsider dares call himself an Elmheim. But Aster remembers them all too well. Darius and Grion, the very brothers who killed him in his past life. He recalls how he once saw them as terrifying figures of immense power, but now they just look like children playing at being nobles. Alfin's voice suddenly cuts through his thoughts, snapping him back to the present. She grabs his arm, trying to pull him away from the confrontation he started. But it's too late, as Darius turns his cruel attention to her instead. He mocks her for not hiding behind her father and orders her to come entertain them. Alfin turns away, her body tense with silent fury. But she quickly spins back, her eyes blazing as she flatly refuses his demand. Aster grabs her arm, trying to stop her from escalating the situation. His grip is firm, a desperate attempt to hold her back. But his expression is grim, knowing he's already lost control. Darius's face twists into a cruel, manic grin as he decides to twist the knife. He cruelly reminds them of their father's greatest failure, and how his own brother, Roderick, cut off his arm as punishment. The words hit Alphen like a physical blow, her face shadowed with shame. One of the other nobles sneers, glad he doesn't have the blood of such a loser in his veins. That's the final straw, and Alphen shoves Aster aside, demanding they take it back. Darius responds by spitting his drink right in her face. He mocks her for being a girl, unable to inherit the family title. With a cruel grin, he tells her to wear rags next time she comes to a party. Alphen can only stand there, humiliated, but her eyes burning with defiance. But as Aster steps forward, he thinks about how he was worried, that seeing these faces again wouldn't even make him angry anymore. He calmly takes the bottle from his other brother's hand. Alphen looks up, shocked by his sudden intervention. Aster calls out to Darius, casually tossing the bottle into the air, and his brother can only watch as it comes hurtling right back at him. He draws his sword in a flash, slicing the bottle clean in half mid-air, and the contents drench his brother's head in a humiliating shower. Aster stands over him, his expression utterly devoid of emotion. He calmly licks a stray drop from his lip, identifying it as simple grape juice. A cruel smirk spreads across his face as he mocks them for drinking like children. His mind flashes back to his training, his father warning him about his uncontrollable power. He remembers the day his magic went berserk, nearly harming his new family. The memory of their terrified faces is a constant, haunting reminder. It was the first time he truly witnessed the overwhelming force of the Seven Wings, a power so dangerous that even his adoptive father was stunned by its potential. He even questioned if such a force could ever be truly controlled. A power that consumed the boy, making him a danger to everyone around him. Back in the present, a guard bursts into the conference room with terrible news. The Viscount demands to know why he's being interrupted in the middle of a meeting. The guard reveals that the sons of the Elmheim main and branch houses are fighting. The news sends a jolt of shock through Viscount Highfried, and his brother, Duke Roderick, looks on with a cold, calculating fury. The Viscount immediately rushes from the room as Alphen calls out to him. He finds his daughter and demands to know what's happened. She can only point towards the scene, where Duke Roderick is already watching with a predatory grin. In the center of the arena, the two brothers face off as the crowd murmurs about the rare spectacle. From the balconies, other nobles watch with keen interest, knowing this duel could change everything. The tension is palpable, making even the most seasoned lords sweat under the pressure. Even Duke Roderick can't contain his fury, realizing this gathering is about to get ugly. Darius channels his rage into his blade, furious that a stray dares to challenge his family's power. He proudly displays his four-wing crest, a symbol of the Duke's house that awes the onlookers. With a condescending sneer, he demands that Aster show his own crest. But Aster simply stands there, agreeing that showing off a mere pattern is quite embarrassing. A cold smirk spreads across his face as he says he could never do something so tasteless. The insult hits its mark, sending Darius into a blind, uncontrollable rage. Aster lays out his terms. If he wins, Darius must apologize to his sister. Fueled by pure rage, Darius launches himself forward in a furious opening strike. Their blades meet in a shower of sparks, a clash of arrogance and cold resolve. But Aster easily parries the blow, his form perfect and unshaken. And in that single exchange, he's already drawn first blood. Enraged, Darius unleashes the power of his crest, his blade glowing with crimson energy. He swings with all his might, but Aster's defense doesn't even waver. From the balcony, Alphen can only watch in horror, calling out his name. But another observer notes with a smirk that Darius's swordsmanship is still immature. He knows, however, that the overwhelming magic of the crest can make up for any lack of skill. The observer explains that if one wing holds the power of a single candle, then the magic of Darius's four wings is a veritable explosion. He mocks Aster, asking what happened to all his earlier bravado. Aster holds his ground as Darius taunts him, questioning if his demand for an apology was just talk. With a final furious push, he demands that Aster show him his true power. From the sidelines, one of the nobles smirks, believing the match is already decided. But a strange, ethereal light begins to emanate from Aster's blade. He effortlessly pushes back, his own power clashing against the crimson crest. Darius can only stare in utter disbelief, his attack completely neutralized. Aster looks up with a cold glare, telling his brother he talks too much. With a single, powerful swing, Aster sends his brother flying backward. The golden energy swirls around him, a testament to a power Darius can't comprehend. He remembers the 10 long years he spent mastering this magic, all for the chance to get his revenge, and his eyes burn with the promise of a decade's worth of fury. He unleashes a torrent of golden slashes, completely overwhelming his brother's defense. Darius is forced to his knees, unable to withstand the relentless assault. From the sidelines, his other brother, Grion, can only watch in utter shock. He can't believe that Darius is actually being pushed back. Darius screams in frustration, reminding everyone of his 4-wing crest. But Aster simply looks down on him, his golden eyes completely unfazed. He unleashes another blinding flash of golden energy, leaving the crowd to wonder if this newcomer could actually win. Aster presses his attack, his blade a blur of relentless, overwhelming force. The nobles murmur in disbelief, shocked that the Viscount's house has a warrior of this caliber. But Aster's focus is absolute, his eyes locked on his target. From the balcony, his father watches with a grim expression, sensing this is getting out of hand. Darius grits his teeth, refusing to be humiliated by this unknown upstart. He remembers the cruelty his own father is known for, and a twisted, manic grin spreads across his face as he channels that same malice. But Aster meets that madness with a cold, burning fury of his own. The golden energy erupts into a dark, uncontrollable torrent as Aster struggles to hold it back. From the balcony, Alphen can only scream his name, terrified of the power he's unleashing. The magic explodes outward, shattering Darius's attack and sending Aster flying back. But Duke Roderick simply watches from above, his expression cold and unreadable. Aster lands hard, his sword skidding across the arena floor as he regains his footing. He stands over his defeated brother, throwing his own cruel words right back in his face. His golden eyes glow with a chilling intensity, the duel now decisively over. With the fight won, he turns his back on his enemies and looks up towards his family. Alphen leans over the railing, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and relief. And a small, confident smile returns to Aster's face, his rage finally subsiding. But his victory is cut short as a familiar, chilling presence fills the hall. From the grand staircase, Duke Roderick descends, his aura radiating pure menace. Aster's eyes widen, a flicker of recognition in his gaze. He looks up at the man who destroyed his life, the source of all his pain. And the name echoes in his mind, a curse he's carried for a decade. Roderick. The crowd murmurs in disbelief, shocked that the branch house has so thoroughly humiliated the main family. But they all know that after a defeat this public, the Duke will not let this go. Aster remains perfectly still, his expression unreadable as he awaits the inevitable. On the ground, Darius begins to laugh, a wild, unhinged sound that echoes through the silence. And now, Aster stands face to face with the man he has sworn to destroy. Duke Roderick's eyes narrow, his silence more terrifying than any threat. But Aster meets his gaze without a hint of fear, his own resolve unshaken. On the ground, Darius scrambles towards his father, desperately grabbing his leg and pleading for him to step in. He points a trembling finger at Aster, demanding his father punish the mutt who defied them. He begs Roderick to use his power and put the upstart in his place. But in a flash of brutal, unrestrained fury, the Duke's hand comes crashing down, not on Aster, but on his own son's hand, pinning it to the shattered floor. The onlookers can only stare in stunned silence at the shocking display of cruelty, and Darius looks up in pure terror, unable to believe his own father would do this to him. Roderick looms over his son, coldly reminding him that he has dragged their family name through the mud. From the balcony, Viscount Highfried screams for his brother to stop this madness. But the Duke declares that a warrior who can't avenge himself has no right to wield a sword. And in a flash of movement that stuns the entire hall, his son can only gasp in pain and disbelief. Roderick's crimson eyes burn with an unforgiving light, but Aster steps between them, his own blade blocking the Duke's path. He reminds the Duke that his cousin still hasn't apologized to his sister, and he asks his uncle to save the punishment for after that debt is paid. The Duke's aura flares as he scoffs at the orphan who now thinks he's a true Elmheim. Aster declares that his father taught him everything about a knight's pride and honor. From the balcony, his family can only watch as the Duke's fury intensifies. Roderick accuses him of tarnishing the name of the kingdom's most powerful house. The Viscount knows this has gone far beyond a simple children's quarrel. The other nobles watch with a grim understanding of the situation's gravity. But one young man seems to be enjoying the chaos from a safe distance. The Duke reminds him of the price his own father paid for disloyalty, an arm. And now he demands to know what price Aster is willing to pay for his defiance. But Aster addresses his uncle with a calm, measured tone. He explains this was a legitimate duel, an answer to the insults against his house. Duke Roderick's eyes burn with a cold, murderous rage. Aster throws the Duke's own twisted philosophy right back in his face, declaring he won't surrender anything. From the balcony, his family can only watch in horror as the situation escalates. But the amused observer from before can't believe a 10-year-old is causing all this chaos. The Duke's fury simmers as he processes the boy's unyielding defiance. With a quiet understanding, he draws his own sword, issuing a challenge that silences the entire hall. Aster doesn't hesitate, taking his stance with a warrior's resolve. But in a flash of movement that defies all logic, the Duke's blade comes crashing down with overwhelming force. Alphen can only watch in terror, her hands covering her mouth in shock. But her father roars his brother's name, his fury finally boiling over. He launches himself from the balcony, a blur of motion aimed at the Duke. And his blade meets Roderick's in a deafening clash of steel. The sheer force of the impact sends Aster skidding backward across the floor. His father lands between them, calling out to make sure his son is all right. The arena floor is completely shattered from the force of their exchange. But the Viscount's face is tense, a single drop of sweat betraying the pressure he's under. Aster, however, is already back on his feet, his sword held at the ready, and his golden eyes burn with a fire that refuses to be extinguished. But from the crowd, another powerful noble watches the scene unfold. He turns away with a knowing look, the spectacle now over. The two families stand on opposite sides of the shattered arena, the tension still thick in the air. Viscount Highfried rushes to his son's side, catching him before he falls. Aster looks up bloodied but defiant, declaring that he protected his promise and his family's honor. And his father can only look back with immense pride, telling him he was magnificent. As Duke Roderick and his son retreat up the stairs, the other nobles can only watch. One of them approaches the Duke, boldly calling his public display of anger rather childish. He reasons, however, that it was a necessary compromise to save the main house's reputation. Darius can only listen in humiliated silence, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He stood against the great Duke Roderick himself, a rising star who survived the impossible. The other nobles agree that for a boy like him, there could be no better debut. But elsewhere, a far more powerful figure senses an age of upheaval on the horizon. As his family rushes to his side, Alphen can't hide her concern for her injured brother. And with that explosive debut, the seasons begin to change. Sometime later, at the Viscount's estate, a group of young knights watches a sparring match in awe. Aster moves with a speed and precision that defies his age. His opponent can only smile, calling his performance magnificent. He looks on at the young master with genuine admiration. They note his skill is terrifying for a 10-year-old, and that he's been training even harder since the gathering. The other knights gossip about his victory over Duke Roderick's third son. They see it as a refreshing blow against the main house's long-standing arrogance. Aster knows that at the gathering, he made his presence undeniably known, and that his actions should silence some of the whispers against his family. But his true goal was always the Elmheims, and he wanted to test his limits, to see just how far his abilities would go right there in the lion's den. He knows, however, that as he is now, he's still no match for Roderick. The thought only hardens his resolve. He understands that the wing crests are merely indicators of one's magical potential, and that innate power is useless if he can't control the 7 wings dwelling inside him. He wishes he could truly test the power of the 7 wings without the fear of losing control, and so he pushes himself relentlessly in the training yard, facing off against the other knights with a blur of controlled force. His golden eyes burn with an intensity that belies his age. One after another, his opponent's training swords hit the dirt. He stands alone amidst the fallen, asking if anyone else is left to challenge him. A familiar voice notes that he's going all out again. It's his sister Alphen, who teases him for his lack of restraint before telling him their father is calling. Without hesitation, Aster agrees and makes his way through the defeated knights. But as he leaves, he notices his sister's unusual attire. Alphen turns back with a determined look in her eyes. Aster asks why she's wearing training clothes, remembering she didn't think they were cute. She explains that watching him has inspired her to change as well. He's taken by surprise as she shoves a training sword into his hands. With a confident smile, she tells him he'll be her sparring partner when he returns. Aster can only smile back, agreeing to her challenge. He jokingly asks her to go easy on him as they stand in the center of the yard. Sometime later, Aster knocks on the door to his father's study. He enters the room announcing that he's arrived. Viscount Highfried looks up with a serious expression, asking his son to take a seat. Aster sits before him, his expression calm and attentive. His father begins by reminding him that it's been 10 years since he joined their family. He places a small box on the desk, admitting he'd planned to wait a bit longer. Inside, A brilliant crimson ring sits on a velvet cushion. The Viscount explains that this is the proof of the next head of the house, and with a serious gaze, he asks Aster to be the one to inherit the title. He knows their house is in a precarious political position, but as a branch of the Elmheim family, they have a territory and people to protect. And for the sake of their lineage, the position of heir cannot remain empty forever. Aster's first thought is for his sisters, asking if they would approve of this decision. The Viscount explains that his other daughters return in 3 days, and he plans to make the announcement then. Aster's mind immediately goes to his other sisters, Marfa and Kudo. He knows they won't be happy with the decision, and that Kudo will be especially angry. His father seems to understand, acknowledging that Kudo resents him for being a male heir blessed with 7 wings. And with that, Aster stands abruptly, declaring that he cannot accept the title. He turns away, admitting he's just an immature fool who can't even control his own magic. Someone who nearly harmed his own family has no confidence he can lead them. But a small, knowing smile plays on the Viscount's lips. He admits that for a long time, he suspected Aster is no ordinary child. He closes the box, explaining he'd intended the ring as a reward for Aster's incredible debut. He tells Aster that it seems he'd be happier with this instead. Aster's eyes widen in confusion, asking what his father means. The Viscount reveals the name of the gift, the magic sword Grammy. A blade capable of controlling the power of the 7 wings, the magic devouring sword. Sometime later, they walk through a forest with his father declaring this spot should do. Aster questions why they couldn't just use the training hall, but his father calls it a precaution. He remembers all too well his son's tendency to break things when his power goes wild. He explains that Gram is a legendary blade passed down through the family, which he had brought from the main house just for him. With a determined grit of his teeth, he begins to unsheath the legendary weapon, and Aster can only look on in stunned disbelief at the weight of this gift. Aster looks down at the weapon, which his father points out has no physical blade. But when the Viscount channels his magic, a crimson blade of pure energy erupts from the hilt. He explains that the sword is completed by its wielder's power, a blade of pure potential. With a single swing, he unleashes a devastating wave of energy that carves a perfect tunnel right through the dense forest. But he warns that for those with mediocre power, the sword will simply drain them dry. He offers the cursed blade to his son, asking if he's willing to try. Without a moment's hesitation, Aster takes the hilt in his hands. He focuses his will, pouring his own immense magic into the legendary sword. And the result is an uncontrollable explosion of pure golden light. He realizes his magic is flowing into the sword on its own, a torrent of uncontrollable energy. Back at the training grounds, the knights see a strange red light streak across the sky. They wonder if it was a comet, but realize the light shot upwards instead. Alphen watches them argue, her expression unreadable. But she knows with absolute certainty that it has to be Aster. Meanwhile, Aster can only marvel at the incredible power of the sword in his hands. His father, however, asks what's so extraordinary about the blade. He explains that the truly extraordinary thing is the power that Aster himself possesses. He reminds Aster that no one in their family's history has ever had a 7-wing crest, and that mastering it will make him stronger than even the twin wings. Aster realizes that with this power, he could finally surpass the man he swore to destroy. But his father warns that power too great will always breed conflict. If the world ever learns of his 7 wings, he will be envied, resented, and hunted by those who wish to use or eliminate him. So to avoid regretting his powerlessness when that day comes, the Viscount urges his son to get stronger now, while he still has the chance. Aster grips his father's hand, vowing never to live a miserable life again. He thanks the man who raised him and promises to master the 7 wings, no matter the cost. 3 days later, the Viscount and his wife stand ready to welcome their other daughters home. And among them is Kudryavka, the sister Aster knew would resent his existence the most. And just as predicted, Kudryavka makes her grand theatrical entrance. With a booming voice, she calls out for her dear little sisters. But the younger girls rush past her, embracing their other sister Marfa instead. Kudryavka is left standing alone, wondering why she didn't get a hug. The younger ones explain that their sister Kudo is just too rough with her affection. She scoffs at the accusation, insisting she has mastered knightly etiquette. But her attention quickly shifts as she spots Alphen standing nearby. She immediately pulls her into a bone-crushing hug, asking if she's been good. Alphen can only struggle as her older sister smothers her with affection. As their parents watch the chaotic reunion, Marfa finally asks the question on everyone's mind, "Where is Aster?" The Viscountess mentions Aster, and Kudryavka's expression immediately darkens. Her eyes hold a chilling resentment for the boy she's never met. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Aster is pushing his limits with the magic sword. He's surrounded by a whirlwind of crimson energy, barely holding on. He grits his teeth in frustration, unable to control the blade's immense power. He can manifest the blade, but suppressing its wild energy takes everything he has. He can only wonder how his father wielded such a weapon with such ease. Just then, a voice cuts through the chaos as his sister Kudryavka approaches. He turns in surprise, only to be chided for not coming to greet her. She looks down on him with a smug, challenging grin. She mentions hearing all about his performance at the gathering, asking if he thinks he's too special for them, and how the night school was buzzing with talk of his exploits, making their father proud. Aster tries to deflect the attention, insisting that she's the truly impressive one. He points to the honor medal on her uniform, proof of her own incredible skill. But Kudryavka dismisses the praise, calling it the bare minimum for a future heir. Her eyes narrow as she asks if he rejected the title out of pity for her. Aster denies it, insisting he just doesn't feel ready for that kind of responsibility. A small, unreadable smile plays on her lips as she listens to his excuse. She turns away, muttering that both he and their father are being cruel, and she walks off, frustrated that they would stand in the way of her dream. Aster's eyes widen as he realizes she's not joking. Without warning, her blade comes swinging down with incredible force. She effortlessly slices through a massive tree, sending it crashing towards him. Aster is forced to leap out of the way, narrowly avoiding the impact. He lands in a crouch, demanding to know what she's thinking. But Kudryavka simply declares that it's time to test his true strength. With a confident grin, she warns him that she's coming at him for real. Aster tries to protest, explaining that his sword is still incomplete, but she coldly asks if he could make that same excuse on a real battlefield. The word enemy sparks a familiar fire, and a chilling smile spreads across his face. She takes her stance, warning him not to hold back or she'll crush him. Another attack narrowly misses him, and Aster realizes this is no joke. He's already struggling just to keep his own wild magic under control. But he knows he has no choice because his sister is actually trying to kill him as their blades finally meet in a clash of power.